Sitting down.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Here's Frankie.
Say hello to Noni, everybody.
Hi, Noni and
Hi,
Frankie.
Noni and Frankie.
Introduce yourselves.
I just
You
have to
guys
get
go
every-
first.
Do I want to select always show the screen sharing? Yes, I do. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start. A few other people will join us. So we have Australia, we have England, we have New Zealand, and we have me. So hello, everybody. Good morning. It's 6 a.m. in New York. I would not be this chipper for anybody other than you guys. So
We appreciate it.
oh, you guys have been great. I appreciate all of you. So introduce yourselves, guys. Start with you in Australia.
Me? Okay, hi. My name is Frankie J. Holden, but you can call me Frank or Frankie. And I play Roy in A Place to Call Home. How are you? G'day.
And I'm Noni, and I play Elizabeth Blythe, or Goddard, as I am now, Lizzie. And I'm here with Frankie near where he lives in Merimbula in New South Wales. I came down today. I'm going to do a couple of performances of my one-woman show, Mother, because he's trying to raise money to build a new theatre company, a new theatre building, in fact.
A theatre.
Yeah, so that's why we're together. Normally we wouldn't speak, but, you know.
Frankie, we have a lot of people in Australia who love buying theatre tickets. Tell us a little bit about your theatre.
So I live in a very small town. It's almost halfway between Sydney and Melbourne on the east coast of Australia. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's called the Sapphire Coast, but it's remote. We're 6 hours from Sydney, 6 hours from Melbourne, and I moved here 12 years ago, and as you do when you come to a small community, you get involved in the community. And I've gotten involved in a number of projects, and this is sort of the latest one. And the idea is to build a small theatre, 200-seat, raked seating, and that will allow us to bring international stars like Noni and other performing arts companies who tour around Australia, allow them to come to this area. But it will also be a facility for schools and local universities, local drama groups, local dance troupes, and other live performances to use this facility. Because at the moment, there's really just a couple of licensed clubs which have rudimentary facilities, but nowhere really for the arts to be showcased in a professional manner. So that's what we're doing. It's been a long gestation period. It's been in the pipeline for 4 or 5 years, but we're at the pointy end now where we're bringing people like Noni to town so that the locals can see the sort of theatre, the sort of performance that is possible if you have an appropriate venue. So it's actually quite an exciting time, and Noni's been very, very kind and generous with her time, and the whole town, as you can imagine, is abuzz with excitement because Noni, if for those of you who aren't aware, though you may be aware, Noni's an iconic figure in Australian show business.
I have an iconic figure. Sorry.
But she was awarded a Lifetime Achievement last year in our local, what we call the Logies, which are the equivalent of your Emmys. And she's made a tremendous contribution to theatre, film and television. And she's really loved. And so for her to take time out of her schedule and come down to this tiny little backwater, it's made everyone feel very, very special. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. I can't wait.
Frankie, please keep us posted about the theatre. What's going on? Do you have to raise money? You're selling tickets? Please, keep in touch with us and let us know. So, Noni, this is a chance to talk about Mother.
Yeah. Well, when Channel 7 here cancelled A Place to Call Home at the end. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
At the end of season 2, I thought I'm going to have to find some employment. So I spoke to a dear friend of mine, Matt Sholton, who's a director.
Where is Matt? Have him come say hello. We love Matt.
Say hello.
Matt posts lovely posts about you.
There you go. And Matt is well known to a wonderful Australian writer. Here he is.
Hello.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
And we got together and talked to this lovely writer, Daniel Keane, and talked about some themes that we were interested in. The primary one was judgment, how we live in such a judgmental society, and how we judge ourselves, and that's very difficult to. Anyway, we said, look, Daniel, you go away and write something up as a proposal, and we'll try and get you a grant to write this play. And 10 days later, he knocked on Matt's door, and he'd written the play.
In 10 days.
In
Hey?
10 days?
In 10 days. Unbelievable.
Wow.
And so we organised a tour. Matt organised a tour regionally through Victoria and Tasmania and New South Wales and Queensland, which I've done. And very, very good news is that we're going to be doing it in Sydney on a main stage in January, February. And that's the first capital city that we can do it in, so that's great.
How many seat theatre is in Sydney?
It's about 350, something like that. Yeah. So
Nice,
it's
nice.
quite an intimate show, so it's ideal.
Right. Excellent, excellent. Kate. Hi, Kate.
Yeah.
Say
Hi.
hello. Say hello
Hi.
to Frankie and Noni and talk away.
Hi, Frankie. Hi, Noni.
Hello, where are you?
We're in the UK. We're in Chester, so not far from Liverpool, Noni.
Oh, right. I was there with my sons not very long ago. I took them to see Liverpool play.
Yay!
The
And,
right side.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to England for the first time in my life, I'm ashamed to say, last October, and took my wife and daughter, and it's one of the best holidays we've ever had. We absolutely loved it. We were blessed with very good weather. We didn't get up to Liverpool. We did the south and the southwest and the Cotswolds and all of that, and it was great. And I'm definitely coming back.
Definitely do Wales next time.
yeah, you've got to do
Yeah.
Wales.
Love to go to
Token
Wales.
Welsh.
Have you guys, Noni, you were in the States, weren't you? You've been here?
I have been to the States very briefly, yes, but not for many years, not for many, many years. This was the first time I'd been to Europe for 35 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
I'm too busy being a single mum and working.
Well, I'm going to hopefully take the pilgrimage to Australia next year and be able to see this country that has, I never thought about Australia before I found you all. And now I'm like crazy about it. I read everything, and I have a big Australian map on over my desk, and quite a few of our fans have come to Australia only because of this show.
That's
So
amazing.
it really
You'll
is.
never want to leave.
So
Have you been here, Katie?
special.
Yeah, my sister lives in Perth, but we lived in Brisbane in 2008 for 14 months.
We loved it. We didn't want to come home, but immigration sent us home.
Yeah, because I got my first diagnosis with cancer in 2008 in Brisbane, so I had a lot of treatment over there. But my sister lives in Perth, so
And it's made me want to emigrate there once Kate's passed.
Yeah, so she's going to go back as a nurse, hopefully. So, but
Wow.
we've got an affinity with
All things Aussie.
many memories there and many happy times. And my nephew's there, who's 10, so we're regularly Skyping with him as well. So
It was hard last year. We were there in January and we watched Brisbane play in the 2020 against Perth, and we were sat in the Perth bit trying really hard not to cheer for Brisbane.
You got to be careful what you do and say in that situation.
Yeah, that's right.
It was really tough.
Yeah.
okay, so you guys are real super fans. You got a captive audience here. You can ask Frankie and Noni anything you want.
Nearly anything.
Okay. So, one of the questions that we've got is, Kate and I would love to sit and sort of have a couple of jars with you and just look over the lake from where you live in the place to call home, Roy, or sit and have dinner at the Bly's and kind of feel the tension at the dinner table. If you could choose somewhere that you would call home, for example, like home to us is Australia, somewhere relaxed and countryside, where would you choose to be, or where would you choose to end your days with a great vision looking over?
What an interesting question. It's a lovely question. Well, you want me to go first?
Yeah,
Are you thinking? I grew up, now we're all, seeing as we're speaking about Australia, I grew up in the northern part of Australia, in the Northern Territory. And that's what they call the outback. And it's a romantic, rugged part of Australia that even not many Australians go to. So I'd like to say two things. That's where I would like, that's what a place I would call home, because when I go back to that part of the world, something really speaks to me. It speaks to my soul and it speaks to my heart. And the Aboriginal people of Australia have a wonderful relationship with what they call country, which is the land. And they have it's a filial, it's a matriarchal relationship with the land. And when you go to these parts of Australia, the remote parts of Australia, then you really do understand, or begin to understand, the relationship that they have with the land. So I'd say that, the place that I would call home would be the top end. Maybe maybe at the Darwin Sailing Club, having a barramundi with chips, looking out and watching the sunset over the Arafura Sea. And while I'm talking about that, if you'd like to, particularly Susan, Google Outback Spirit. Outback Spirit. Write that down.
Okay.
Outback Spirit. Go onto their website and click on the videos, and you'll see me giving you a tour of many of these really remote parts of Australia. They're fabulously beautiful. There's scenic grandeur, huge waterfalls, rugged country, and you guys as well, you Poms, have a look on that, and then you'll see a different part of Australia. Outback Spirit.
We became fans of Gurrumul while we lived in Oz. We lived with a great family that were very music orientated. So we became fans of different alternative music. I was teaching there at the time, so I took my students and sort of introduced them to different cultures that they needed to understand about Australia. So it's a great place to think about looking at.
Yeah, Outback Spirit tours, or Outback Spirit, you'll find it.
And what about you, Noni?
Well, I'm desperately trying to think where I would like to end my days, and I find it really hard. I'm being drawn to France at the moment. I visited France as part of the trip with my sons, and I've been, my idea of porn is looking at real estate in France.
At least you can't get into trouble over that.
That's right. Well, financially I might. But I'm very drawn to, I may actually go and spend some time there next year to do some writing. But I because I've always had such a sort of gypsy life, because of being an actor, you just sort of go where the work is. I don't really think of anywhere as home other than Australia in a general sense. Where I live in the hinterland of the Gold Coast in Queensland, I have a beautiful acre there. And that's home, but it doesn't feel like a spiritual home. But when I fly back over Australia, I do feel like I'm coming home. It does feel like that's where I belong. And I had a chance to live and work in England in the 80s, and I always thought I was English because my parents were English. I'm the only Australian born in my immediate family. And I thought I'd be going home to England to work, and I couldn't wait to get home.
Well, interesting to mention that. As I said, I went to England for the first time ever in October last year, and I had a similar feeling. And we are all, well, not all of us, but the vast majority of us are descended from English stock. And I definitely felt at home, and I felt a spiritual, a touchstone with England, isn't it? Do you find that interesting?
Yeah, there's definitely past lives or something in there that resonate. But I guess wherever my sons are is home.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's
to
nice.
me.
Yeah.
Speaking of geography, tell us a little bit about this fictional town of Inverness. We know that it's a small town in the 50s, but tell us a little of the backstory. You know, who are the neighbors? Is there a main street? Are people isolated? Do they come together in church? Do they, what's the town like?
Well, it's my domain. It was Elizabeth's domain. It's my town. Very, very much like any little country town, I guess, anywhere, and that's why it has such universal appeal. It is a class system. Certainly in Elizabeth Bly's mind, it was. And most of those country towns in those days were based on agricultural wealth.
It reminds me of the area in which it's shot, which is around Camden and Campbelltown, just southwest of Sydney. Was the birthplace of the Australian merino industry. So sheep. And so it generated incredible wealth for Australia back in the 1800s. And similar to the mineral boom, the mining boom that this country's had over the last 25 years. It's almost impossible to fathom now how wealthy wool made Australia. And there's another area too, Nones, which I've just had a visit to, which is the Western Districts of Victoria. So what you have in places like Inverness is you have a rural environment, but also incredible wealth. And it's the Blyes would be nowadays the Blyes would be old money. That is money that was made probably even in the 50s. The Blyes' fortune and holdings and traditions were all probably set up 75 or maybe even 100 years before the show is set in the middle 1800s as opposed to the middle 1900s. So they are, they're the aristocracy.
The squatocracy.
Yeah, the squatocracy. Yeah. They're the lord of the manor in that area. But at the same time, there's also nearly everybody else would be working class. And this obviously is before much automation came to Australia. And Australia in those days was very much tugging the forelock to England. And you see that. We were a God-fearing country.
Oh, very much so. Church would have been the equivalent of today's shopping malls.
Yeah. Right. One thing that's missing, which I find interesting, in the show is there's no pub culture.
No.
Which, of course, would have been a very important part of life.
Yeah, we saw a bit of the pub with the Bert storyline, didn't we? With Sarah going in.
Oh, yes. Right.
However, every Bly that comes into the lounge has to go to the decanter and fill up in every shop. You've noticed.
Yes. To the port.
Yes.
And speaking of that, in that honour.
You can't be an Aussie and not have a drink in your hand.
There's a lot of drinking. George drinks a lot. He drinks a lot.
George.
Frankie, let's talk a little bit about Roy. Tell us when you got the part and you knew what kind of backstory did you come up with for this charming, rough guy?
Well, did you have to screen test? Did you have to audition?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So I was actually, you know where I was? I was in the top end. I was
of Australia.
Of Australia. I was on a holiday with my family. We were in a place called the Bungles, which, as it sounds, is miles from anywhere. And I got a phone call from John Holmes, who's a Channel 7 executive, or was, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm on holidays in the Bungles. And he said, can you get to Sydney tomorrow? I said, not tomorrow, but the next day. And he said, I've got something for you. So I had to test, but I was the last one that they tested. I think they were having trouble finding the right guy. And so I had the role. He told me I had the role, but he said, you've got to come down and put something on tape anyway. So, but it's a personal backstory for me. And it's one of the reasons why I love playing the role so much. My mum grew up on a sheep property she was born in the early, mum's passed on now, but she would have been born in the mid-20s. And her mum and dad lived on a sheep property in an area of Australia called the New England Ranges. It's a rural area in the northwest of New South Wales. And I remember going there as a boy. We'd go there for holidays. And so Mum's dad, I call Poppy, and Mum's mum was Nan. They had a sheep property. And Mum's brothers, my uncles, all had sheep properties as well, and there were 3 or 4 of them. So I can remember going out to that area on holidays, and we'd go there for 3 or 4 weeks at Christmas, and these uncles would taught me to ride, they taught me to shoot rabbits, they taught me to skin rabbits, they taught me to shear sheep, they taught me how to crack a whip, they taught me how to catch a snake, and they
Not how to behave.
They were gods to me, these men, because they, at this time there were TV shows like the Cisco Kid and the Lone Ranger, and these guys could do the horse tricks that I would see the Lone Ranger doing or the Cisco Kid. Whip cracking and riding, running up and mounting a horse from the rear. I don't mean that the way it sounds.
How much wine?
But you know what I mean, don't you? You jump over the back of the horse, then you're on the saddle, and then away you go. Anyway, these guys could do all those things.
I'd love to see George do that.
Anyway,
Little trampoline.
When this role was offered to me, I thought this is a wonderful opportunity to bring these men to life. And so it's a personal it's personal to me from the point of view that I knew these guys, but also on another level, it's not a version but an aspect of Australian manhood or Australian maleness that is disappearing, and some may say has disappeared. And so I wanted to bring that, to the man from Snowy River. You guys are probably familiar with that aspect of Australiana. And, I thought it was a great opportunity to bring that to a contemporary audience. So every time that
it keeps it alive for people that don't know it. It makes people fall in love with that side of Australia they might never get to see.
Yeah, so Roy's got, he's laconic, but he's got this, he's very reliable, he's steadfast. He's not really progressive in his attitudes, but he's not blinkered, he's not a bigot. If you can prove yourself, you can be gay, or you can be a black man,
or Jewish,
and Roy will have he will stand off because of the ingrained racism that's part of. But if you prove yourself, then you're all right by Roy, and he will do anything for you. And so I find it a very appealing part of the Australian character. And so it's just a joy for me to go to work and bring my uncles to life. It's great.
But he has a sad backstory too, doesn't he? His personal life.
Well, that's right.
It's been very sad.
Particularly when the series started, he was down in the dumps. He was very curmudgeonly. He'd lost his wife. He was sick, and his 2 boys had been killed in the war. So he copped some batterings. But then when Sarah...
Like a hermit, wasn't he?
He was almost a hermit. He was very much a recluse. He didn't like the doctor. He didn't think much of you. But then gradually Sarah's arrival in the town and into Roy's life slowly brought out that humanity. So my journey, or the journey I've taken Roy on with using the scripts as a basis, is to bring Roy back to who he was before all those tragedies occurred to him.
Yeah.
So he's a character in the town. He now, as it turns out, he's the one relied upon to MC the talent quests or the electioneering campaigns. Which is what he was. This is my imagination. That's what he was before all those tragedies occurred to him. But he's a joy to play. And I must say, Bevan and the writers bring a wonderful rhythm to Roy's dialogue and speech, and I'm pleasantly surprised that they do it, because I know a bit about it. As I say, I've lived with these people, and I know how they speak and the patterns, and the script writers generally do a great job. But obviously, we do have the ability to tweak it if we so desire.
Can I just ask, because Roy secretly got married, because we noticed in
Season 5, we've had a preview.
Season 5, Episode 2, there was a reference to...
Don't you dare tell anybody. Go
Okay,
ahead.
we won't tell anyone.
Okay, it's just there was no reference
Everybody's
to it.
everybody's going to know about it, but that's all right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a reference to it, but there wasn't a reference to it. So we were just like,
Well, Doris certainly thought that there was an imminent marriage, didn't she, in season 4?
We liked the way you talked to Doris and she understood.
Yeah.
It was a really nice...
Frankie, does
Well,
love...
I don't think Roy has... I don't think Roy's lain with a woman, to use a term, for possibly...
Many a year.
Well, it'll be probably now it'll be coming on to 10 or 12 years.
So what has he lain with?
Lucky, he's been laying with Lucky.
Lucky's been keeping his bed warm to cuddle in. That's what it was.
We just keep this nice, okay? Just all friends, okay? So there is, well...
No spoilers.
It's about time, I'll just say this. It may be time for romance to come back into Roy's life. I'll just say it.
Well, Elizabeth's been lucky, so Roy deserves to be lucky too, doesn't
he?
Yeah. Without telling us too much, because in the States we have not seen it yet, does love soften Roy at all? Are we going to see a new side of him?
Oh, yes. If Roy was to fall in love, and then obviously it would soften him, because it softens everyone, doesn't it? So yes, if that happens, which I'm not at liberty to say,
But I don't think it would change him that much.
No. But it would bring out other aspects of his personality, and probably make him even more warm. And because even though he's, when you're portraying these characters, you want to make them as rounded as you possibly can. You want to make them as human as you possibly can. So you want to, within the limits of the characters and the scripts, and you need to be able to show all aspects of your character as a rounded human being, I believe, anyway.
You might get a good set of glasses instead of jam jars.
No, jam jars definitely go for...
They'll come back into fashion, and you worry
already are.
Yeah. Well, that was something. Right, there's an example. That was something that I knew from my father, not my grandfather, and I asked the props department, if they could find me some, and of course they love it. And I must say, we are blessed in that aspect of the production, aren't we?
Totally.
The art department, the props, it's full of detail and full of authenticity, and they take great pride in their work, and that's why it's obviously appealed to an international audience to the extent of it, because it's recreated. Yeah, it's great. It's really great.
Kathy and David, say hi.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, where are you guys?
Near Yeppoon. Do you know Yeppoon?
Yeppoon, yes, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're from Queensland. We'll speak slower.
Okay.
Have you had some rain today?
Kathy was one of the first people to become a member of our group, and she really introduced me. She sent me a few very long emails with some beautiful, beautiful pictures, and really was the first one who introduced me to the physical beauty of Australia. And she's been a super fan since the beginning. So go ahead, Kathy. What's on your mind?
I've just been listening. It's been really good. Nice and relaxed. Talking tonight. We've got a bit of feedback if we leave the microphone on, so
Yes, I do.
Beautiful area there.
It is indeed. Yes, yes. Tambourine Mountain is my home.
Yeah.
Um,
Tambourine from there, from the end of the ridge.
Yes, yes, that's right. It's gorgeous.
We know that season 5 jumps ahead 4 years. Without, we don't like spoilers because it ruins all the fun. But can you tell us a little bit about how the climate of the country has changed, and how, are we going to see the characters progress with the times? Is Elizabeth going to be, still caught up in her old ways? How has the time and love changed Elizabeth?
Well, I think one of the most significant things that happens between 54 and 58 is the coming of television in 1956, and we had the Olympic Games in Melbourne in 1956. And so for the first time, we are getting an American influence in this country, as opposed to the British influence. The very first time. So we're starting to get American television shows and American movies. American movies were there. The American soldiers during the Second World War were the first kind of influx of American culture, but it began to be an everyday thing. So you've got rock and roll, you've got all these different influences, and the war is receding in the younger generation's minds. It's now 13 years since the end of the Second World War. So we have a whole generation of young people who have not had any experience of the war. They might have had an uncle who died or a grandpa who was there, but it's not such an active part of life. So certainly for people like Elizabeth, it's still very much in her mind. And now that she's married to Douglas, who runs a refuge for returned soldiers, that's one of her major preoccupations. She lives in Sydney at the beginning of the season with Douglas, and they're very active in helping those returned servicemen, many of whom were utterly traumatised, as a lot of returned servicemen are. This is before there was such a thing as post-traumatic stress disorder. You just had people who were completely freaked out and antisocial or whatever. And so she has poured a lot of her energy into helping these people recuperate, to give them some comfort and some support, particularly now that the family is off doing their own thing. George is still a politician when we start in 1958. Abby, who plays my granddaughter Anna. Yeah, thank you. Abby is much older in her head. She's an accomplished writer. Jack and Carolyn are living at Ash Park. Carolyn has been married to Jack for all these years, 5 years or so.
Did you see the gradual loosening up of the attitudes towards morals as well, don't you? So in that period, if you'd be aware, things like women's lib was starting to come about, and women's sexuality was being recognised. So you see that, and you see the rise of youth culture and youth rebellion. There's some of that, and there's also an interesting, well, I think I can say this, there's a character comes into town who's an Aboriginal guy, played by a wonderful Australian actor called Aaron Peterson, and that's another element of Australia that prior to that hasn't been addressed in the show. So that's an interesting story, how everyone reacts to that, even and so the elements of that racism, again, that inherent, or I won't say racism is too strong a word.
Well, we had a white Australia policy.
We did have a white Australia policy.
And the 60s.
So,
I grew up in Melbourne, and most people who lived in capital cities in Australia didn't ever get to see an Indigenous person.
No, that's true. And most people still haven't.
No, they weren't around.
Unless they go on an Outback Spirit tour.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about that?
Are you on commission? Frankie, are you on commission over there?
This is a commercial.
But the most important thing, girls, is, of course, you've got a whole new range of fashion.
Yeah.
cars and fashion and the way people look, and it's fabulous the way they've captured that.
But Australia is really
amazing.
Yeah, they are. They're
funnily enough, Roy, 4 years have gone by, but Roy's still wearing the same gear. Isn't that funny? He's still got the same shirts and pants that he had 4 years previously.
Roy will never go out of fashion, though.
That's the thing.
Frankie, your truck is, I see you haven't gotten a new one yet either. That's a character of its own. You know, the cars are a big, big part of, and I'm always, we have a member who's a classic car fanatic, and I'm always sending him a picture and saying, can you identify this car? I'd never heard of a Holden before, but do you tell us about the mechanics of it? When we see a lot of driving, and by the way, I hope Norman has found another job, because I see that Elizabeth no longer has a chauffeur. But the fashion and the cars and the horses play an important contribute greatly. Can you tell us a little bit about how they play into your characters?
Okay, well, I can tell you that the truck that Roy drives is the same truck that Hugh Jackman's character drove in the movie Australia. Have you seen that movie?
Of course, multiple times.
Well, it's the same truck, and I'll tell you something else, which I think is quite ironic. Once I'm driving the same truck that Hugh Jackman drove, I get a little kick out of that. And then once I was in the wardrobe department trying on shirts, and they gave me a shirt that Hugh Jackman wore in the movie Australia. Well, you know what? I couldn't get over my chest and shoulders. What a pussy, Hugh Jackman.
He would be really hard to accolade, Roy, that's why.
Got some shoulders, Hugh. I'm saying, beef up, man. But it is a bugger of a thing. I'll tell you, that truck. It's not easy to drive. Yeah. And at one point, Marta and I, there was an issue with the exhaust. So the exhaust fumes were coming up through the floor of the truck into the cabin, and exhaust fumes are very, very dangerous. And we're doing this scene one day down at Camden. It was a really hot day, and we, not Marta and I fault, but just technical issues, we had to keep doing it. And I actually thought we were going to pass out until I had to say, stop. I don't want to seem like a wuss, but we cannot work with this truck anymore until it gets fixed. And, of course, everyone goes, oh, bloody namby-pamby actors, until a couple of them came over and went, oh, geez, that is dangerous. Yeah. So it is. It's a temperamental beast, the truck.
They're very hard to drive, these vehicles. And I remember when I first got my car. Was it a Bentley? I don't know cars. Yeah. And there was a scene that described Elizabeth alights from her vehicle regally, and this is very early on in the show. And people must have been much shorter or something. I don't know.
Yes, they were.
But I had a big fur coat and a stupid big hat and gloves and a handbag and every other thing. And I tried to get in and out of this car. I had to bend double. I looked like a cockroach on its back. So in the end, they couldn't film me getting out of the car. They had to cut away because there was no way you could get out of the car gracefully. It just wasn't going to happen.
No, and it's very difficult.
Very difficult.
It's very difficult to do anything like stand up regally when you make that standing up noise. But
even the steering wheel used to cut into Norman's lap.
Yes.
They're not like we're used to today, that's for sure. They look great, but they're not as comfortable.
Yeah, they are. They're
Frankie,
definitely a part.
Frankie, what kind of car do you drive in real life?
Well, my name is Frankie J. Holden.
Yes.
The initial letter F.J. Holden. Holden is a famous car in Australia. And the F.J. Holden is an iconic model in Australia. And in fact, Dr. Jack drove an F.J. Holden in the first 2 or 3 seasons of A Place to Call Home. So I do have one. I do have an FJ Holden, just like Dr. Jack's. It's the same colour, in fact. It's called Olympic Green because it was released in the 1956 Olympics. And I also have a 1966 model HR Holden, and I've got a 1966 because that's the same year of birth as my wife. And then I drive a current model Commodore wagon, which is just it's like a town car,
Also a Holden.
It's a Holden as well, but it's a family wagon, So I have the family wagon, which is just a very comfortable car. It's a good car. And then I have these 2 older vehicles, which I keep as toys, but I do use them.
It's been very sad for Holden this week to hear that they've stopped making them in Australia now, considering they're such classic cars and they'll always be Aussie to us. It's like end of an era. So it's good to know that you're keeping hold of them. Yes,
very much so. It's and I've had to do a couple of interviews. I was on 60 Minutes and I was on the ABC. Because of my name, etc. They're asking me for my feelings about that, and it is the end of an era, and it's representing a technological change where we just cannot manufacturing's in its death throes in this country, as I think it is in a lot of other countries around the world.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it, which is a tragedy for the people who have lost their jobs, but there's a romantic aspect of it, whereas this wonderful brand, Australian brand, and I meant so much to Australians to be able to make their own cars back in the day, and it's no more. But you're going to change
your name to FJ Hyundai.
Harold Hyundai.
What do you drive, Noni?
I've got a Hyundai.
So have I.
It's a black thing. That's all I know. Cars all look the same to me, apart from the old, the beautiful old cars with marvelous design. But modern cars, I couldn't tell one from another.
Well, that was another thing I brought up when I did one of these interviews. Is that it's great, seeing these old vehicles in A Place to Call Home, because it's another element of contemporary life that's just being homogenised. All the cars are starting to look the same.
Yep.
And soon we're going to have driverless cars, and guess what? They're going to be punched out of the same factory somewhere in China probably, and they're all going to look the same, and we're going to lose another element of design and beauty and form and line.
Same as architecture.
Yeah. Yes.
Noni, I promised I would ask this question. Somebody wants to know, I can't remember, I'm sorry who asked, but they wanted to know, do you really have a rose garden? Do you play piano at home? And do you really knit?
Yeah, yes. I don't have many roses in my garden because I'm not there enough to tend them, but there are some roses. I do play the piano at home, and much more successfully than I play on the show, because all the pianos in the show are actually unplayable. They're so old, they can't be tuned properly. So they give me this music to learn, and I practice and practice and practice. And then I get there, and it just sounds like I'm playing with my elbows. So there's one really funny scene for poor Robert, who plays Douglas, who had to gaze lovingly at me while I played to him on the piano that's in front of the big mural wall at Ash Park. And it really is unplayable, but he had to look at me while I was playing. Honestly, it just sounded like 7 spiders had been let loose on their keyboard. It was pathetic.
But I will say that it's obvious to me that you can play the piano, because, and it's a thing, it's a bugbear of mine.
Yeah.
If I see a person, an actor, and the role calls for them to play the piano or the guitar or the drums, and it's obvious that they can't.
And I knit. I love knitting too. Yeah, knitting is a great pastime.
Excellent. All right, we're going to wind down, but just two quick questions. What can we look forward to? Don't tell us, we don't want any spoilers again, but tell us a little bit more about what we can expect in season 5. And then the international audience, talk to them a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what I'd love the international audience to know is that we are so thrilled that our show works for you, because, you know, in Australia we are a long way from everywhere, and to get the kind of feedback that we get through Susan and her fellow administrators and through all of you. You know, I check Facebook daily. I'm often putting things on there, but it just does us so much good to know that what we're doing means something to people everywhere, because a great story is a great story, and human beings share more similarities than differences. And I think I've expressed this in posts before, you know, in these times when we're being constantly separated from one another and us versus them, it's just so lovely to know that we're creating a family, really, and it does feel like a family all over the world. We feel we have these friends that we can talk to about stuff all over the world, and the themes that we raise are in the show are themes that clearly resonate all around the world. And to get that kind of feedback, to know that we're telling stories that make people think and feel and that move them and inspire them or cause them to reflect or discuss things with each other as opposed to just pressing buttons, that gives us such joy, and it really helps to make, you know, the 6 months a year when we don't have work bearable. So we're very grateful. But in terms of what you can expect, you can expect much more complexity in a way. It has the same kind of thriller elements that it's always had. There is some tragedy, and there is a lot of joy. We have small children in season 5, obviously. That's not a spoiler because there were babies at the end of season 4, and now they have personalities and they have presence, and they bring another element to the program entirely. But I just hope that, you know, you will respond in the way that you have, and I think you will, because there's so much in there. We were very pleased with the standard of the scripts for season 5.
Many of the themes are universal.
Yeah.
And apply to any society. And then when you add into that the fact that it's set in Australia, and which I know is interesting, and it's interesting to us looking back in time, and I think that's part of the reason for the success of the show. But I agree with Noni 100% to, there I was, as we've said, in the middle of nowhere. I get a phone call, and now here we are 6 years later, talking to people on the other side of the earth. Yeah. And that's just wonderful, and it's something to be very, very grateful for, and we are.
Yeah, incredibly so.
Well, I want to say, you know, I know Noni and Frankie, you know that I come from the world of show business, and my career in Hollywood started at the heyday of Dynasty and Falcon Crest and all these shows, which are now Dynasty has been resurrected because they couldn't come up with anything new. And I think part of the reason that your show is so popular is because it is new and different, and you take a period piece that's relevant today. Our group talks about we have deep discussions about the Holocaust and about PTSD and about homosexuality. Lots of talk. I know you have a vote coming up that for marriage equality, and there's been lots of discussion about it. Not all of it positive, but it keeps the discussion going. One more thing, just talk about the wonderful dear Bevan Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bevan is an icon of Australian television drama. He's been behind so many wildly successful television dramas, and he confessed this to us at the start, that he felt that he was bringing all of his experience, all of his skills to bear into this show, and it's a labour of love for him. And I think that shows every time we sit down and read the scripts for the first time, we spontaneously applaud. And I will honestly say this, coming up to 6 seasons. When we get together and do the read-throughs, every page, I'm still going, oh my God, really? And they turn like, oh! And it's a joy. It's a joy to read, and then it's a joy to bring it to life on the screen. And he's just been a wonderful, vehicle for projecting Australian lives and values onto the screen over so many years.
And also,
he doesn't like you.
Oh, that's fine. but also, I think I asked him very early on, why did you write this? Because I knew, we were going to get interviewed about it, and I needed something to hang it from. And he said, I wanted to talk about bigotry and intolerance. And we learn less and less history about ourselves each year. Kids are learning less and less history about their own countries and their own cultures as we do become homogenised, as we mentioned before. And so I think it's really, how do you stop wars if you don't know what started them before? How do you learn from the past if you don't know what happened in the past? And that's why Elizabeth resonates for me, because she was all about secrets in the beginning. She was all about keeping things hidden. And I've just been been lucky enough to do an episode of Who Do You Think You Are for Australian television.
Well, look forward to that one.
Well, thank you. My mum was very secretive, and the things I learned, I wished she had told me, because we would have had a very different relationship.
Yep, know that one.
So I think that's something that I think is a great theme of this show too, that secrets hurt and cause damage, and not knowing about the past is not a good thing.
I think it's particularly, we live at terrible times, particularly in the United States, where every day there's something new that divides us further. And so being able to watch A Place to Call Home, where we see people really evolve, going from the bigotry and the intolerance to acceptance, it's just a wonderful, wonderful message. I want to thank you guys. You've been terrific. Keep in touch. Frankie, let us know about this theater and what's going on. And when you play with that fabulous band of yours, the fans are just thirsty for everything. And Noni, you know how we all feel about you. Your continued participation and interaction with us you are so responsible for so much of the warm feeling and the connection. I don't know how many 10,000 miles away from you, and I feel like I'm sitting in your living room and, having some of that nice Australian wine. And so thank you. We're going to post David, who is our very able technical advisor, is sitting quietly there with Kathy, is going to post this so that the members can get a chance to know you a little bit more. We look forward with great excitement to the new season, and keep those cards and letters coming.
I'm in.
Yeah, and keep the feedback coming, because we find it fascinating. We love seeing, particularly when you try and work out what's going to happen. We love that.
Excellent. Be well. Noni, have a great time. I'm sure you're going to have a terrific audience. And Frankie, now you can, we're big on hyphenates in show business here. So now you are actor, musician, producer, and theater patron. I'm gonna go to Wikipedia right now and add that. Okay.
Thank you for organizing this, Susan. God bless everybody.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye, guys. Stay well.
Bye. All the best.
Bye.
Break a leg. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that was fun. Wasn't it?